The one moment I will never forget for the rest of my life was not the moment the doctor walked in. It was not the test results. It was not even the word pregnant, hanging in the cold hospital air like something fragile and impossible. The moment that broke me was the 5 seconds before all of that. 5 seconds where my husband, the man I had loved for nearly a decade, looked me in the eyes and said, "I want a divorce. Not at home. Not over a quiet conversation. Right there, in a hospital room, while I was waiting to find out if I had cancer." I remember the sound the fluorescent light made above us. That low, steady hum, and I remember thinking, is this real? Is any of this real? Because nothing about that moment felt like the life I had built. Nothing felt like the man I married. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, before I tell you what the doctor said, and before I tell you what we found out that completely turned everything upside down, I need you to understand something. This is not just a story about a marriage falling apart. This is a story about what happens when the people closest to you are not who you think they are. This is about secrets that had been buried for years. About a woman who thought she was the problem when she was never the problem at all. And about a man who was being slowly pulled apart by forces his wife could not see. So I want you to ask yourself something as you watch this. Have you ever loved someone and wondered if the version of them you fell in love with was the real one? Because that question is exactly where this story begins. Her name was Rachel, 31 years old, a registered nurse working long shifts at a mid-size hospital in Columbus, Ohio. She had met Daniel at 24, at a mutual friend's birthday dinner where he had laughed too loud at his own jokes and she had found it charming instead of annoying. They dated for 3 years before getting married. And for a while it was good, really good. They had a small apartment with yellow curtains she had picked out herself, a dog named Scout, and weekend routines that felt like something out of a life she had always wanted. Daniel was warm, creative, a little anxious about money, but warm. He had started a small home renovation business with a childhood friend, and though it struggled in the early years, Rachel believed in him. She always believed in him. But somewhere around year 3 of their marriage, things began to shift in ways she could not quite name. Daniel started coming home quieter. The warmth was still there sometimes, but it had edges to it. He started spending more time on his phone. He would cancel their Friday dinners with vague excuses. "Work stuff? I'm tired. Can we just stay in?" And Rachel would tell herself it was the stress of the business. She worked nights. He worked days. They were ships passing, she told herself. It was normal. Couples go through this. But the thing about distance is that when you stop paying attention to it, it grows. And by year 4, Rachel felt something she had never felt in that apartment before. She felt like a guest. Like she was living in a space that had quietly reorganized itself around her absence. Small things. His clothes were always on his side of the closet now. Scout slept at the foot of his side of the bed. His mother's photo had moved from the hallway shelf to the living room mantel front and center, and Rachel had not been the one to move it. Have you ever felt like you were slowly being replaced in your own life and couldn't figure out when it started? Because that's exactly what Rachel was feeling. That quiet, creeping sense that something was wrong. But no proof. No moment. Just a feeling she kept talking herself out of. The hospital visit had started 6 weeks earlier. With fatigue so deep Rachel thought she was just overworked. She was pulling double shifts, barely sleeping, skipping meals. She told herself it was burnout. But then came the dizziness. Then the nausea in the mornings that she kept blaming on the cafeteria coffee. Then the weight loss her coworkers started noticing before she did. A colleague, her friend Diane, pulled her aside one afternoon and said, "Rachel, honey, you need to get checked. I'm not asking. I'm telling you." So Rachel made an appointment. And when the preliminary blood work came back with a few unusual markers, her doctor ordered a full panel and asked her to come back with someone she trusted. she asked Daniel. He came. Quiet in the car. Quiet in the waiting room. His leg bouncing against the plastic chair the whole time. She remembers reaching over and putting her hand on his knee to still it. He did not pull away. But he did not hold her hand either. They had been in the exam room for about 20 minutes when it happened. The doctor had stepped out to retrieve the results, and the room had gone the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. Rachel was staring at the paper on the exam table, that thin, crinkly paper, when Daniel cleared his throat. She turned, and the look on his face was something she had never seen before. Not fear, not sadness, something more like resolve. Like a man who had made a decision and was forcing himself to say it before he lost the nerve. "Rachel, I think we should get a divorce." She stared at him. The hum of the fluorescent light above them filled the silence. "What?" she said. Not loudly, almost like she was asking herself. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months. And I know the timing is terrible. I know that. But I can't keep pretending." Rachel opened her mouth. She still doesn't know what she was going to say. And then the door opened. The doctor, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Anita Reeves, stepped in with a manila folder and stopped almost immediately. She looked at Rachel. She looked at Daniel. She read the room in about 2 seconds and said, with careful professionalism, "Should I give you a few more minutes?" "No," Rachel said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "Please, tell me." Dr. Reeves sat down across from them, opened the folder slowly, and said, "So the markers we were watching, I'm glad to tell you they came back normal. It's not what we were concerned about." Rachel exhaled so hard her whole body deflated. And then Dr. Reeves looked up and said almost gently, "But there is something else in your results I want to talk to you about." The room went still again. Daniel leaned forward. "What is it?" Dr. Reeves looked at Rachel directly. "You're pregnant, Rachel. About 7 weeks." Nobody spoke. Daniel sat back in his chair like the air had been pushed out of him. Rachel looked down at her hands. And somewhere in the silence between those two people, a marriage that had just been handed its ending, was suddenly standing at a crossroads nobody had planned for. How would you feel in that moment? Sitting in a hospital room, just told you are not dying, just told you are carrying a life, and the man next to you had just asked for a divorce 60 seconds earlier? Think about that. Really think about it. If this story has you feeling something right now, drop a comment below and tell me, "I'm still here. I genuinely want to know who is watching with me until the end." Rachel did not cry in that room. She would tell you that herself. She just went numb. She thanked Dr. Reeves. She picked up her purse. She walked out to the parking lot with Daniel 2 steps behind her. And when he tried to say something, she held up her hand and said, "Not right now." They drove home in complete silence. Scout met them at the door, tail going, completely unaware that the apartment he lived in was quietly splitting in two. That night, Rachel sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time. Just sat there, thinking about the word pregnant and what it meant inside a marriage that had just been told it was over. She thought about her own mother, who had raised her and her brother alone after a divorce that broke the whole family apart. She thought about what she had always promised herself, that her child would not grow up the way she did. And she thought about Daniel, the Daniel she had met, the one who laughed too loud at his own jokes. Where had he gone? And why had he disappeared so quietly that she hadn't even noticed until he was already gone? Over the next several days, the apartment became a battlefield of silences. Daniel slept on the couch without being asked. He left early. He came back late. He looked at Rachel's midsection once. Just once, with an expression she couldn't read, and then looked away. She caught him on a phone call late one night, voice low, standing in the kitchen in the dark. When she appeared in the doorway, he ended the call immediately. "Who was that?" she asked. "Nobody," he said. "Work." She didn't push, but she started paying attention to things she had trained herself to stop noticing. The way his phone was always face down now. The way certain text notifications made him tense and quiet for hours. The way he had stopped mentioning his business partner Marcus, a man he used to talk about every day. And then one Tuesday morning, when Daniel had left for a site visit and Rachel was getting ready for her shift, she found something she hadn't been looking for. A printed email, folded in half, tucked between the pages of a notebook on his desk. She almost didn't open it, but she did. It was from a woman named Tanya. Short email, just a few lines. It said, "You need to stop letting her guilt you into staying. I already told you what your mother said. You owe her nothing. Come home." Rachel stood in that kitchen for a very long time. Come home. That was the phrase that lodged itself in her chest. Not, "I love you." Not even, "I miss you." Come home. Like Rachel's apartment, their apartment, wasn't his home. Like home was somewhere else now. Like it had been somewhere else for a while. She packed a bag. She called Diane. And she left. Rachel spent 2 weeks at Diane's house. She cried more than she expected and slept less than she needed. And every morning she would put her hand on her still flat stomach and make herself a quiet promise that whatever happened between her and Daniel, this child would be loved. She filed for a legal consultation. Not yet a divorce, but a consultation. She needed to understand her options. She told herself she was moving forward. And then, 11 days after she left, she received a message on Instagram from an account she did not recognize. The message said, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but there are things you need to know. Things I didn't know either until it was too late. My name is Tanya. I'm asking you to please meet me." Rachel sat with that message for a full day before she responded. She told Diane, who told her not to go. She told herself the same thing 3 times. And then she went. They met at a coffee shop on a Thursday afternoon, and Tanya was not what Rachel expected. She was quiet, a little nervous. She kept turning her coffee cup around in her hands. And the first thing she said was, "I never had an affair with your husband." Rachel looked at her. "Then what was that email?" Tanya exhaled. "That email was stupid and I regret sending it. Daniel and I grew up in the same neighborhood. We're old friends. Nothing more. But I've been the person he called when he didn't know what to do about his mother." Rachel went very still. "His mother," she repeated. Tanya nodded slowly. "His mother has been working against your marriage since before you two even got engaged. I'm not exaggerating. She never approved of you, not because of anything you did, but because you weren't someone she could control. She told Daniel you were career-obsessed and emotionally unavailable. She told him the business was failing because of you, because the loans stressed him out, because you weren't supportive enough. She fed him those ideas for years, slowly, carefully, and when the business started actually struggling, she started introducing him to people who she said could help. But really she was just surrounding him with voices that confirmed everything she had already planted in his head." Rachel sat very still through all of this. "The divorce idea," Tanya continued. "He told me about it 2 weeks before he said it to you. And I told him it was wrong. I told him he was making a decision based on his mother's version of his marriage and not his own. That's why she was upset with me. Because I wasn't agreeing with her anymore. There is something uniquely devastating about realizing that the story of your marriage was being written by someone else. That the doubts your husband carried about you were not entirely his own. That the silence at dinner, the distance, the way he stopped looking at you, some of that had been cultivated. Deliberately, by someone who smiled at your wedding and hugged you at Christmas and called you honey, in a voice that always felt slightly too warm. Rachel drove home from that coffee shop and sat outside Diane's house for a long time. She thought about Daniel's mother, Linda, a composed, polished woman who had always made Rachel feel subtly insufficient without ever saying a single rude word. Every compliment that carried a quiet correction. Every holiday visit that ended with Daniel just a little more withdrawn than when they arrived. Rachel had noticed it. She had even mentioned it once. And Daniel had said, "She means well. She just worries." He had believed that. He had genuinely believed that. And maybe that was the most heartbreaking part of all. Daniel called Rachel 3 days after her meeting with Tanya. He did not say he knew they had met. He just said, "Can I see you? I need to talk to you. Please." She met him at their apartment. Her name was still on the lease. He was sitting on the couch when she came in, Scout pressed against his leg, and he looked like a man who had not slept in a long time. He did not make excuses. He did not explain or justify. He said, "I've been in therapy for the last 2 weeks. I started going because I knew something was wrong with me and I couldn't figure out what. And the more I talked, the more I understood how long I had been letting my mother's voice be louder than my own." He looked at Rachel directly. "I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve that. But I need you to know that asking for a divorce in that hospital room was the worst thing I have ever done. And I need you to know that it came from fear and confusion and years of being told a false story about who you were. Not from the truth. Never from the truth." Rachel looked at the man sitting across from her. This imperfect, complicated, quietly damaged man who had almost let the wrong voices destroy the best thing in his life. And she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But the beginning of it. They did not get back together that night. Real life does not work that way. What followed was months of couples therapy, hard conversations, and the very slow process of rebuilding trust that had been quietly eroded for years. Daniel's mother was confronted. Not dramatically, but clearly and firmly, and the boundaries that followed changed the family dynamic permanently. Some people in Daniel's family never understood. A few took Linda's side. Daniel let them, because he had finally learned to choose. Rachel gave birth to a daughter 7 months later. They named her June. And on the night she was born, Daniel sat beside Rachel's hospital bed in a different hospital room from the one where everything had almost ended. No fluorescent flicker this time, just warm light, and a husband who had finally found his way back to the truth. So I want to ask you something before you go. If you were Rachel, if the person you loved asked for a divorce while you were waiting on medical results, could you have found a way back? Or would that have been the line you couldn't uncross? If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and tell me what you felt. I read every single one. And if you are new here, please subscribe because the next story we are bringing you is one I promise you will not be able to stop thinking about long after it ends.